Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Keys to the Rock, episode 9, potentially. But what I do know for sure, sponsored by CG Insurance.
Proudly sponsored. Oh, my bad. I messed that up. Good like that.
Good like that. Hashtag. Proudly sponsored as well. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us, guys. Today, Daniel, we are in the most incredible of locations.
Tell me about this place, because I feel safe.
You feel safe? Okay. Guys are in the back cave today. No cell service, the gates closed, and we are going to talk about all things property law. But
I thought you was the most responsive agent. How do you not have any cell service?
You know, we're going to go upstairs.
You have a runner? Do you have a runner?
I'm going to go upstairs, and I'm going to have one email after this, mate. I'm going to tell you that's a lot. No, it's nice to unplug.
So where are we? Just tell us about where we're at right now.
This property, guys, we are at Lemmington Caves. This is the largest private property with a cave on the island. Okay. I typically say it's roughly maybe 40 or so % the size of Crystal Caves, which is absolutely huge. Mm-hmm. So a long time ago, guys were playing cricket. The ball kind of ran down down through a hole. They found it.
Still the story from Crystal Caves.
That's a Crystal Cave story. I know.
The Wilkinson family, right, or something like that.
Yeah, it's a Wilkinson Trust, all that. Mm. But no, this is unbelievable here. It is one of the most incredible experiences.
This is amazing, honestly.
We're on like a dock here, access into the water, and you've got these stalagmites, which typically range.
How do you spell that?
Stalag and then MITES. And typically, that one's probably about like between 1 and 5,000 years old.
How can you tell?
Well, it's definitely older than a year, and it's probably up to 5,000 years old. But it's an unbelievable property. We've got this on the market for about $5.4 million. 2 assessment numbers. The house.
Too salesy. Anyway,
the house is lovely, and it's also available. So it's for sale, but also available for short-term rentals and events. So very important to.
And events.
Yep, events. Short-term rentals, dinners, experiences, and all the like.
We shouldn't have put that on the episode. We should have just kept that.
I'm talking to the event guy. Podcast hat on, Daniel. Go.
So last episode, we was lucky to have Peter Goodall.
Good all the time.
Good all the time from Property Skipper, and much appreciated, Peter. He actually put us in his newsletter, which was fantastic. So
absolutely, yeah. Property Skipper.
Shout out Peter. Shout out Burn News.
Yep.
They posted the last episode, so exciting stuff all together. Property Skipper, he shared a bunch of insight and just basically details about what he sees in the stats and the data and the trends.
Yeah, Property Skipper is the one-stop shop for, I must say, I would obviously promote my website, but that's where you'll see the entire database of what's available for sale, for rent, and absolutely worth checking out. And thank you to Peter, and also for them, being able to kind of revolutionize the way that you search and interact with real estate in Bermuda, which is always, today and in the future, needing change.
So episode 8, go check that out if you haven't checked that out. And what else have we done? We're about to reach out to Matt Kelly, but what have we done?
Over the last month, the Family Center, so we were very honored to be invited to speak to the young people of Bermuda and talk about real estate and all the different categories and opportunities that are in real estate.
So
people think it's agents, but it's everything that we're kind of highlighting through this podcast, all the different facets of it.
No, for sure. So fantastic stuff. So without further ado, because we don't have to really get into this. This is a big topic today. Yeah, this is a big topic. Might even be a longer episode than usual. Who knows? But Mathew Kelly is here, 1T. And he's here from Hamilton Legal, and he's going to share not amazing, but it's amazing. It's informative stuff that the average person might not know, and this is the purpose of our podcast. So without further ado, and also shout out Matt Kelly. They are actually one of our sponsors. You would have seen that.
Brand new sponsor, Hamilton Legal, a newly formed company which is specializing in real estate itself. And
but you can talk. You can talk more about it. So let's bring in Matt Kelly.
Matt, come down the steps. Come into the cave.
Hello.
Hey. We're like in-laws that don't show up unannounced. CG. Good like that.
All right. Thank you to our sponsors. Awesome commercial. Ben is always doing Ben stuff. Thank you to Greenlight Energy and Hamilton Legal. And speaking of Hamilton Legal, we would like to introduce none other than Mr. Mathew Kelly, Matt Kelly.
1T,
Matt Kelly. And he's here to talk to us about conveyancy, a.k.a. real estate, law, everything to do with that. So we'll start it off by, Matt, just tell us about yourself and what it is that you do.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. I know this is a really popular project now and a great location as well. I wasn't expecting this.
A little unique, isn't it?
It's very unique.
You can't hide from us in here. So
no,
the gate is closed.
I feel slightly trapped and locked in.
I know. We might get rained on by the stalagmites, but anyway, go on.
Possibly. So my background is I've been a real estate attorney for over 20 years now. Okay. I deal with both residential and commercial transactions. I act for a wide range of clients here, so from first-time home buyers to sellers to international buyers to financial institutions. And we've recently been appointed to head up the real estate division at Hamilton Legal. Okay. Hamilton Legal, it's focused solely and specializes solely in real estate, which is quite unique for Bermuda, just to have that one sort of specialty.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And we try to have a sort of an ethos of, particularly in this busy market, an ethos of client focus and being responsive. And, I think, acting for the sellers and buyers, it can be, it's a personal issue dealing with property. Yeah. It's a major investment that they have. So, there's emotions there and people can feel stressed at the same time. So I think with that ethos, we just want to put them at ease and literally walk them through every stage of the transaction. A lot of client care where possible. Yeah. So that's, and particularly, like I say, in this busy market, it's important to stay on top of matters. And I don't need to tell you how busy the market is, Ben, because I know you probably act on most of a lot of the deals in Bermuda.
We do speak perhaps every day, if not every hour, Matt and I. But well, first off, obviously, congratulations to Hamilton Legal.
Thank you very much.
And I think it's a massive part. Sorry, Daniel.
No, it's massive that they was able to get in on this
such
sponsorship.
A niche focus. Yeah, that as well. Daniel's a sponsorship guy. I'm talking about the practice. I know.
You signed the contract.
Congratulations to Hamilton Legal on being the sponsor. I should say. They're very lucky because all the law firms were trying to talk to us, weren't they, Daniel?
Yep. Had to turn them down.
I know we do, but anyway, I mean, kudos to Matt. I mean, certainly. Knowing that real estate is all about, kind of the productivity and the efficiency and the way that things should be done. Nothing's a done deal until that contract is signed.
So and I can say in your hand.
You need to do that. And I can say, with authority that certainly yourself, and whether it's real estate agents and lawyers, a lot of people work and do things differently. But you guys are seriously on the ball. So can't recommend you guys enough. But all that aside, Matt, talk about basically what is the home buying process? Like, whether it's a first-time buyer or a seller, what do they actually do? Point blank from the beginning.
Sure. So it's largely the same for whichever type of buyer it is. The first stage is once the offer has been accepted by the seller, the real estate agent or the seller's attorney will issue the first draft of the sales agreement. That goes over to the purchaser's attorney. They will then review and amend the provisions, discuss it with the purchasers. Typical provisions you would expect in the sales agreement are, for example, the ones on the part of the seller. There'll be maybe an obligation to carry out a boundary survey. That means, seeing if there's any encroachments over the property, having the boundaries staked.
Tripods. Bring out the tripods.
Absolutely, yeah. You get the surveyors involved. And then the typical conditions on the buyer side are, it may be conditional on them securing a satisfactory finance offer, could be getting a satisfactory building survey report. Typically,
or buying subject to them selling their home.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's various conditions in there. Once you've agreed the conditions, the parties then come together. The sales agreement is signed by the buyer first, typically, then the vendor, and then it'll go to the agents to sign, and the buyer pays a 10% deposit, and then you date the contract, and it's only at that point that you are actually under contract. Each party is tied into their obligations. And once you're under contract, you then have the period of time between contract and completion. That's when the buyer's attorney literally does most of the work. So the buyer's attorney is reviewing the title deeds, he's carrying out the searches.
And that, just to jump into that in terms of timing, the title search and just the closing process, once you're under contract, what is sort of the fastest that can happen, usually, and what's kind of the long stop date on some of those. I know sometimes it could be an international buyer or a PRC, permanent residency certificate holder, and often when they're looking for a license, you would then attribute maybe 3-6 months, and sometimes those are faster nowadays. But what's the kind of timing on that?
So typically, really, the fastest time you can go from exchange to completion is typically about 30 days. That's the minimum, because basically you've got a planning search that you've got to submit, which goes to government. That takes around about 28 days. Then you've got to wait for the conditions to be satisfied, like the finance offer, the boundary survey. What we're experiencing at the moment are some delays to an extent, just because I know personally, that a lot of the bankers are busy or the surveyors are booked up. I spoke to one surveyor the other day, and they were saying their lead-in time is 2-3 months in advance.
Wow. Boy.
So, but if you've got things lined up, you can have the deal done within 30 days, expedite the process, and that's assuming when your planning search comes back, it's free of any outstanding planning issues. Typically, I know you'll be familiar with this.
What's the most common sort of issues you might run into?
It's building permits. There'll be outstanding.
Doing things the seller did something without permission.
Exactly. Yeah, they haven't got the sign off. So now
planning permission.
It could be simply a swimming pool. If you've got a building, if you've got a house without planning permission, you've got obviously major issues. But typically, it's the things the smaller things that they put in.
Well, we tend to find. I know when we was doing valuations, is a lot of people would, as long as the issues aren't really that large unless they involve sort of plumbing and electrical.
Yes.
In terms of when you're going and talking
like
to
structural,
like
termites and stuff like that.
Which is a common issue here, right?
Yeah. So structural surveys. But what I've realized is sort of structural. I mean, we're going to plan to have some structural engineers on at some point in the near future. But
to check out the cave.
Yeah,
we're a little worried. I know. It's been a few thousand.
But
the stalactite's right above our head.
Right above you.
But the turnaround times for these reports, the valuation reports, the structural surveys, the planning search, all of that is it sort of it does hinder the process.
Well, constraints the process, but it's got to be done correctly. So there's no point rushing it, but it's got to be lined up.
This is the biggest purchase of most people's lives.
But structural surveys, I personally always recommend it because, here it's buyer beware. So as soon as you buy the property, the risk passes to you. Yeah. You're buying it as is. So you've got no comeback. You've got no any issue. If there are structural defects in the property, you can't go back and go against the seller.
That due diligence of getting those is really, it's going
to... It is. And remember, we're dealing with high prices in Bermuda too. This is not cheap property. So I generally would recommend it.
And talking about those deadlines for the various conditions and things, I know typically we used to say 15 business days from the point of when you execute an SPA. So when the sales and purchase agreement is agreed, signed, dated, stamped, and all of that, 15 business days maybe to satisfy your financing, to get the structural survey done, to get the on the seller side, to get the boundary survey done, and obviously approved by the buyer with no major issues or encroachments, etc. But sometimes we'd say 20 days, and often, Daniel, you would certainly know from appraisal side that, as we were just kind of alluding to, there's no way to get all of that done in time with the scheduling.
There's a lot of flexibility at this junction, just because, as you said on these episodes, since we probably started, the market has been hot, right? There's been a high volume of transactions, and it's been, I'm not going to say stressful, but it's been a lot on the different companies that are all part of this purchasing process.
But my question for Matt is that I know the viewers want to know, because there's many buyers who freak out when maybe the bank hasn't received the appraisal report yet, or they're under contract but the structural survey can't get scheduled for 2-3 weeks. So what happens when you go beyond those deadlines? Technically, yes, the deal can be null and void, but what do people need to be aware of?
Typically, 9 times out of 10, if you have that deadline in, the parties will agree by mutual consent to extend that deadline. Everybody knows that things are being delayed slightly at the moment. So remember, both parties have, the seller's suddenly taken the property off the market. So he's now committed to this purchaser. This purchaser is aiming for this property. So it's in both parties' interest to agree the extension.
They want the deal to work.
They want the deal to work. So it's not a case of the deadline's gone, you're out of
Yeah,
contract.
it's not
that's
the buyer or seller's fault. It's Daniel's fault because he hasn't got the report in. Something like that.
Something like that.
So
Yeah.
okay.
Ben has said that to me offline before, so you know.
Oh,
I felt
get these
that felt
reports in,
personal.
mate.
That felt personal.
Yeah.
All right, I update.
Always be closing.
Wow. Okay.
But of course, if there are any delays and you do go past that deadline, just not through the fault of the buyers or sellers, and the seller does terminate the agreement, or vice versa, the buyer will get his 10% deposit back.
Yeah, if the deal truly breaks. Yeah.
Terminates and neither party wants to extend the deadline any further, you are protected. Deposit comes straight back to you.
Okay, and then so since we're talking about the 10%, so
Yeah.
for the first-time buyers, so they can get a good idea of exactly, I guess, how the money works into the equation, the 10% is required at which point? 25% or the talk on that a bit.
That's right. So the 10% is required at the time of signing the contract. And once you sign the sales agreement and you date it, you have to pay a deposit, then it's a binding contract.
And that typically is held?
Typically by the agent
or sometimes
the seller's attorney.
Either
or, it depends what role the agent's taken in this process. And then at the end, as you go to completion, you draft up the closing statements, you draft up the conveyance deed, and it's at that point when you come to completion that the balance of the funds comes across. So the closing statement will sell off with the purchase price, then you'll minus the various deductions, so take off the deposit, then you take off the legal fees, stamp duties, etc., and just show your
commissions.
balance payment. So that'll be generally typically for the vendors. For the vendors'
attacking me.
side.
You're lucky he's in between us, mate. You're going swimming in the cave after this.
But I would say just generally spoke about what do we do. Typically when you go beyond the deadline, etc., which I am seeing happening. I think the key thing here is just to preempt those issues, which I just slightly touched on. So if I was a seller, even thinking at this stage of putting the property on the market, I would get the surveyor, the boundary survey lined up, or at least penciled in for a date that they can attend the property, because that'll still be valid, for years. You can hold on to that.
Sure.
That ticks off that list. The seller should also, in my opinion, to avoid the issues of planning search results coming back with items, check in with planning. Make sure there are no, quite often they don't know there's an outstanding building permit or planning permission. Maybe if you've got a dock and you should have a foreshore lease, maybe approach government. Maybe go approach government. That is terrible.
I just call what you said. Foreshore.
Low dad joke every now and then.
So what is a foreshore lease for the people that don't know?
So a foreshore lease,
Daniel, do you know?
I do know.
Okay.
So a foreshore lease is basically the government, the Queen's bottom. And the government owns up to the average high water mark. And you have to get a 21-year lease. If you're about to buy a property with a dock, you have to buy.
Get this guy a law degree.
You have to get a 21-year lease.
I'm just going to
You have to get a 21-year lease from the government to basically encroach on their land.
Absolutely. And quite often I find
a lot of people don't know about it, though.
That's exactly the point. Not many people know about it.
It was never enforced, was it, as much?
It wasn't. I mean, it's difficult to enforce.
It's very tough because of the changing hands and stuff like that.
It only comes to light.
In my new role, I deal with a lot of
government
Pembroke.
Dan, I know.
Pembroke short leases.
I'm going to call you the governor.
Love Ben.
We all do.
But with that, I mean, just touching upon that with docks and stuff like that, what is the date? Because actually, if there was a dock pre-existing a certain date, then actually you are kind of grandfathered in.
It is. That's a really good point. So it's 60 years if you've held it.
It's before I thought it was before 1959 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great year.
Great
like
for docks. I guess.
It's somewhere around there. I feel like if you
can establish it by then, then you've acquired it. You don't need
so
the
they
documents.
go off of like a lot of aerial photos and whatnot.
Just get an aerial photo, make it black and white, and put like 1958 in there.
Yeah, exactly. Just
in orange text.
You'll get the aerial photos.
I'm pretty sure the government have aerial photos.
Well, it could have been a helicopter taking it, Anyway, but all of that aside, the foreshore license, and actually that's a square footage basis, isn't it?
It is.
So it's not a set
storm.
It's a combination. So I think it's done on a sort of a marriage value between it's done on a marriage value between the square footage of the dock, and then it's a little bit more highly.
You're answering the legal questions.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
And then it's done on the
right.
ARV.
That's
It's done on the ARV of the property as well. So those two are combined, but it leans on the latter a little bit more.
And where this problem comes out, and you're right, people tend not to know about it. And where it comes out is when you're selling your property, the purchaser's attorney is going to see it straight away.
Something like
and
that.
now you've got another delaying issue.
A hurdle.
So those 3 points, I would say that's on the seller side to check into, just to preempt these sort of delaying problems. Again, particularly in this busy market, when surveyors are tied up, etc. On the purchaser's side, the key one where I'm seeing delays is to get banking pre-approval.
Yep.
Because
we try to stress that so much
all the time. We had a
key.
banking episode about that.
That's right. That's right.
So what I realized from talking to people more recently is people actually. I mean, I'm not even going to mention who it was, but I was talking to someone who cuts my hair, and they was so wait, I just go. There's a lack of. I don't know if it's on the banking side or if it's what our podcast is here to help, but people generally, Bermudians need to feel more comfortable of approaching the bank. They don't.
Our company, we're going to a presentation at one of the banks in like a week or something like that, and actually, so we're going to talk about all of that. And that's good feedback to know. But especially in a competitive market where things, average days on market and everything are lower, if people aren't pre-approved, they honestly have no chance.
It's absolutely
the seller is not going to look at their offer with
key.
confidence unless they know for sure that they're good for it.
It's for the buyer as well. They need to know what their budget is, what they can afford.
And that's what we try to spell out to a lot of people.
It's so key. You're right. I think it touched on the prior podcast. It's so key because what we're finding, if you haven't done that initially, then you go into contracts and you've got, say, the 21 days to sort out your finance. That pre-approvals situation can take
and I know it's something
months.
that Ben's probably lobbied for, I'd say, is sort of, in this day and age, you almost want, if Ben's showing a property, he almost wants to know that people have the finance and sorted, because it's basically
a lot of people ask.
This improves.
Right?
I mean, obviously, it's key. It'd be more ideal if it's cash purchase. Obviously, not everybody's in that position, but you need somebody there. It's more valuable than having somebody without pre-approval. If they've got pre-approval,
your time,
this is a solid bet.
Pick and choose,
and you're not going to waste legal fees going into contract with that person when you're not definite.
So speaking of legal fees, so I know based on the Bermuda Bar, basically conveyancing fees are pretty much just it's already
offer purchase.
It's already just structured, right?
Yeah,
would you be able to speak on not the exact fees, but
how much do you cost? How much do I cost?
That's too much.
A little bit more after this show. I'll tell you that.
It's basically, but Bermuda's quite unusual, where it's typically not.
Bermuda's unusual.
In bar scale fees on the
He's basically Bermudian now.
On the we typically it's not a sort of a set fee. It's based. It's a sliding scale based upon the purchase price. So the higher the purchase price, the higher the fee. So it's a bit like stamp duty. A bit like that. It's a sliding scale. So to give you an example, if you were buying a property at say $1 million, your fees, legal fees, are probably around about $12,000, and then the stamp duty.
Is that split?
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. So the legal fees and the stamp duty are typically split. And again, this is unusual about typically unusual about Bermuda. Those fees are split with the seller. So in that case, your legal fees will be $6,000.
Yeah, I was thinking 5.
Your stamp duty on that, I think it's in the. I think it's around $34,000.
Are you sure?
Again,
can we quote you?
Oh, yeah.
Could be
Matt,
late
can we
30.
Hamilton Legal said it here first.
Quote the figure. Quote it. Yeah, it's around the 30,000 figure.
Around.
Buyer's going to hold you
34.
to that.
I'm going to go 34. So both stamp duty and the legal fees are split. That's called a gross deal. If it's a net deal, where I don't know, maybe it's been agreed that way because the seller definitely wants to come out with an X amount in his pocket, or perhaps the purchase price has been lowered to get a quick sale, or maybe bank repossession. That would typically go for a net deal, which means the buyer will pay their own legal fees, stamp duty, and if it's a net deal, they'll even pay your sales commission.
Yeah.
So so that's
and those deals are sort of
difference.
frowned upon at times, aren't they? Nothing to do with, just because of the stamp duty and things like that to government.
It can't be seen as reducing the price to reduce.
And also for appraisals, even if you do a net deal, let's say, so it'll be done at a lower number, that number is actually what gets reported, and it won't necessarily specify.
It doesn't.
So when you're looking at comparables and things like that,
registry,
it's going to look as though it's
throws things
price.
off a bit. Yeah. No, and that's where, I mean, we spoke about this past episode, and I just touched on it at the beginning of this one. But that's where having a consolidated sort of central database of all of the sales would be quite helpful.
One other question I have. I mean, people have asked me. Ben. Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
No, you're on your moment. I'm got mine.
This is my moment?
Go ahead.
Okay. No, but people have asked before, do they need a real estate lawyer?
That was my question.
Oh, that was your question?
Well, it wasn't. We're good.
Okay. But do
they need a real estate
lawyer? Can they actually just look at a contract themselves? Go.
Well, I think you know what my answer is going to be. Certainly. So, to me, local knowledge is essential. In Bermuda.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, yeah. I think conveyancing in Bermuda is a bit more nuanced than, say, other jurisdictions.
I think that's across the board of everything real estate in Bermuda.
I do. It's very, very different.
There's no cookie cutter process deal.
So
anything.
Explaining the process to American clients or Canadian clients, it's a very different process. It is nuanced. I think particularly the rules regarding non-Bermudian ownership or international buyers is pretty complex. So for that reason...
What are those rules? I don't want to take you off, but we'll circle back to that.
Yeah, sure. So I think it's crucial you get a good attorney. You want an attorney who's knowledgeable, responsive, somebody who answers your calls, picks up emails, again, particularly in this fast-moving market. In terms of recommendations, you could speak to your agent as to a referral as to which attorney you would use. Or the great thing about Bermuda is word of mouth is key.
Yeah.
You just speak to your friends, your colleagues, people who've used you before, and that quickly...
It's the same with real estate agents.
That's across the board.
It's the same principle with real estate agents.
And just to follow up on that, so, I've had sometimes
this is two
people...
questions now, Ben.
Go
ahead.
Well, it's related to that. Who's counting? But, where people are like, okay, my family's had a great relationship with so-and-so, but they're actually not a conveyancing lawyer, a real estate lawyer. They might do some other sort of law. Technically, can they, and how have you experienced that with working with other lawyers in that instance?
Yeah,
they can.
You're asking him a very difficult question.
You're
asking him to
basically what I'm trying. All of these questions are rhetorical for the most part, but
whoa, Ben,
no big deal. Not the depth of that foreshore. The marriage and all that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it is important to know and to specify why you shouldn't necessarily just hire any lawyer that you've known because they got you off a speeding ticket.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that story?
Yeah, Johnny White. Shout out.
Edit that.
No, actually, good guy there.
Banter.
Yeah. They've got to be specialised in conveyancing. They really have to.
Yeah,
really have to. It's a
niche.
It's a niche.
You got to know what you're talking about. You got to know what you're
area,
dealing with, and like you said, Bermuda is so unique.
Yeah.
So I've got two questions because Ben took two questions. So the first question, international buyers.
Yes.
What Amir, shout out Amir, what he brought to our knowledge is that basically our viewership has now expanded to a little bit more of a global watching zone.
That's great.
Which is great for
St. David's is watching now?
Which is great for... You're never going to get a St. David's listing.
I love St. David's.
But international buyers, Matt. What are sort of the rules and restrictions regarding international buyers that might come into play for them? Matt lives in St. David's, if you couldn't tell. No,
He doesn't.
That's
international buyers.
International buyers, that's a really, really good question. So because Bermuda's a relatively small island, there are some qualifications in place when it comes to international buyers purchasing here. Typically, that sort of translates into it's more the sort of higher end properties that are available to the international buyer.
What's the number actually? Because I think we had an argument last time.
what's an ARV? But
what's the ARV? It's the ARV has to be over.
That's great, because the very first sort of qualification is the properties available to the non-Bermudian purchaser, or the international buyer, has got to be over a minimum ARV. So the ARV is the annual rental valuation. That's just a number, a figure that's
rateable
allocated to every property, and it sort of relates primarily to your land tax payments. So if you want to buy a house in Bermuda as an international buyer, the house must meet the minimum ARV level of 126,000.
That's what I said.
Now, in property values, I think that you can assist with this, property values. I think that roughly translates to a valuation of a 2.5 million, 3 million.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the seller can set the price. I mean, we just did one in Fairylands on that intersection there, and that was around 2. So again, but the ARV was higher. So it really all depends. But because obviously a sales price, and what someone might want to be like, I really need to sell. My ARV is at a certain level, and
so many
I'm going to sell it for 2.3. So, but roughly it's kind of 2.5. I'd honestly say like 3 and over. And we know properties, and there's listings now that are for sale for mid 3s, high 3s, that actually the ARV is lower. So sometimes it's really unfortunate that it doesn't really coincide. But people would pay that price for it.
Market value.
People would pay that price for it. So sometimes it doesn't properly align for how it should be, to determine what the value is.
But the interesting thing, again, going back to nuanced conveyancing law, is there's then a separate ARV level for condos. So if an international buyer wants to buy a condo, the minimum ARV level is $25,800. Okay, is that roughly about $400,000 it translates to in terms of the
and then obviously
valuation?
You're scratching the surface of a big topic to do with that now. With the condos, because now non-Bermudians currently, over the last, 18 months, 2 years or so, can only buy condos in hotel resort development. So we're talking the likes of Newstead, Azora, St. Regis, Tucker's Point, these sorts of, Bermudiana, so previously they would be able to buy anything that was over that ARV, and that again, as you say, might have been 400,000. But now, when you're looking to
a bit of a game changer, for sure.
It is. The law changed, and hopefully, fingers crossed, it may change back, whereby you now need a residential certificate. So, in order to get this residential certificate, you now have to, apply for the economic investment certificate. Then, after 5 years, you can get your residential certificate. So, only after 5 years can you then purchase a condo freely. So it doesn't quite make sense to me, that law. It'd be nice to see it addressed. I would, just on that point, it's an interesting point about the hotel. I'll come to that, because the interesting thing for that is the alien license fee. So once you satisfy the first qualification of the ARV level, the international buyer then has to apply for an alien license. This is
Which
really
is a terrible name for it.
I know, it's
Alien.
not very welcoming.
Yeah.
It's definitely not very welcoming. But it's basically, it's a rubber stamp procedure. It's an application form, 2 pages. You then, accompanying that application form, you just need 2 personal references, ideally from Bermudians, not essential, and 1 financial reference. That financial simply states you hold, be from the bank, and it will say you hold a bank account and it's in good standing. So you're not disclosing monetary values or anything in the bank account. Once you've got that, you then submit it. Typically, it takes a couple of months to come through, but the alien license fee...
Sorry to interrupt, but previously that used to be, we would say 6 to 9 months for that license process, and now, we've seen some 6 weeks, if not sometimes sooner, so it's really phenomenal that government's been, speeding up that process and the touch points it needs to go to get that.
That's for sure.
Because whether it's a house, that's over 126 ARV, the license fees that are going to government are so crucial. And when we talk about these condos, I've sold some condos 2 years ago to non-Bermudians, and now technically, since they're not in a hotel resort development, that condo is not available to the rest of the world, even though it's at such a significant price point that maybe Bermudians wouldn't want that or wouldn't want that kind of condo lifestyle. So I think the license fees that the government's missing out on there is unbelievable. We're talking millions a year, so it is important.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a big point, because with the alien license fees, and this leads on to this point, you get your alien license application in. again, it's a rubber stamp exercise because provided you're not a major criminal or anything, you'll get through. But then you've got to pay your alien license fee, and this is where I believe this will be great to hand to government into their coffers, particularly when we know, it's budget time coming up, so they could be missing out on some of the condo sales potentially because now non-Bermudans are unable to buy. So the condo, the application fee for a house, it's 12.5% of the purchase price. Yeah. For a condo, it is 8%. And the interesting thing I want to touch on what you just mentioned about this sort of mixed-use hotel development, if it's a standard fractional sale, say at Tucker's or something, where that's 6.5%. But if it's a like you said, Newstead or St. Regis, you buy the condo and you put a room into the hotel unit to rent out, then you're paying 0% alien license fee, which is a really great concept. It's been around for a few years now.
You have to buy the hotel, you have to buy the furniture and everything associated because you have to keep the consistency with
exactly. That's right. There's a brand behind it. Yeah. But I do want to say in terms of kudos to government, I think they are trying to encourage foreign investment. I think particularly after, say, 2008-9 world recession, alien license fees for a house. Remember, these are already pretty high-end properties. The alien license fee used to be 25%.
Yeah, which is.
So it has come down to 12.5%. The other thing, as you say, they are trying to speed up the process. I was having to explain to clients why we're waiting nearly a year for an alien license to come
I've had people switch and go to a different island because previously if I was like, it's going to take 6 to 9 months. They're like, we're going to go down to Bahamas and close in 30 days and buy a $5 million house.
So now you're seeing 2 months. Generally, it's a rule of thumb.
So
2
nice
months.
Ripple effect.
It's not much of a disadvantage compared to a Bermudian buying and being able to execute within roughly 30 or so days.
That's exactly right. And then, so as soon as that's quite often a trigger point for closing under the contract. Yeah. So as soon as that comes through, that's generally the last condition. Then you can complete on the deal. So it's positive signs we're seeing here.
Well, I feel like we're going to have Matt back on.
We can talk forever.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I don't know if we're at the hour mark yet. Yeah. But we would get there
52 minutes
if we try.
Let me just close with one final question, which I think is so important. This is so important to touch on. So for Bermudian first-time buyers, we're talking about stamp duty and things like that. There is a possibility for savings, which I think is very, very important.
That was my actual second question.
Really?
Yeah, I was going to ask about first-time buyers, but because I know there's some specifics around.
Exactly.
That,
so we can talk about those specifics, but let's let Matt do it.
First-time home buyers, Bermudian.
Yeah.
This is a great initiative for Bermudians. If the property price is $750,000 or less, and they haven't owned property before, or shares in property, then they're entitled to be exempt from stamp duty.
Which benefits the seller as well as an offer.
If it's a gross deal, then they're not paying.
Exactly. So the seller doesn't pay that share either. But then the buyer has to occupy the unit, don't they? They can't then rent it.
That's not exactly
immediately,
right.
And it's not immediately
saved.
Yeah, you don't get it just straight off the top.
Well, that's a practice some attorneys hold. They'll hold the stamp duty in escrow.
Case by case.
I think it's a bit counterintuitive because the stamp duty exemption is there for a reason because maybe the first-time home buyer does not have the funds. So to now make them pay at the outset and hold it back. And by the way, that process, it'll go to stamp adjudication. That typically takes 3 years because they want to see you've lived in the property for at least 3 years. It's not to make the property an investment. Yeah. I've written before, it'd be great to see the law change on this subject because if the Bermudian wants to rent out the property, it should be, that should be their prerogative.
Just let them do what they want to do.
It has all the right intentions, doesn't it?
I mean, it's right there, just a few changes.
Yeah, because young Bermudians, old Bermudians, whatever it is, if we're buying the first property of our lives and it's under $750,000, we need to benefit from those savings right now. If we want to renovate the kitchen or something that might not be structurally sound, we shouldn't pay and have that money sit in escrow for 2-3 years. Or if we want to rent it, we need that income, right here and now. And
I'd vote for you.
No, I'm not running for politics. But anyway, it's very important. So it has all the right recipe for success. And but I do know first-time buyers are like, I need that money.
Yeah, no, because
it's my money and I want it now, is what they say, right? Like that.
Anywho, on that note, Matt, it has been It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for sponsoring us, and you're welcome for sponsoring us.
Thank you for letting me on. It's been great to meet you two on this project, and just hope you let me out of here when I'm finished.
Yeah, we'll see.
Show me the way out.
Unlock the gate.
He's good.
He's good.
Yeah, he's all right.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Cheers. We'll be back with a message from our sponsors.
And wait. Sorry, we forgot the one main thing. We didn't do it last episode. We said we're not going to mess up again.
What?
If you want to contact Matt,
yes,
you can reach Matt. Where are we putting it, Amir? Right here?
Yeah.
This is his contact details. Amir? Yeah. Excellent. Contact Matt Kelly right here. All right. Now we can.
Thank you very much.
All right, Matt.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, that was pretty good.
That was a fun one.
Matt just left the cave because we let him out.
Yeah.
But that was very informative.
We always say best guess yet.
Because at the time, I mean, we're not going to have our other guests back on again. We might do. But of course,
if the other guests are watching,
the door is always open, or
we apologize.
The gate to the cave is always open. But thanks, Matt. That is an absolutely critical component of real estate.
And it was a fun and easy flowing conversation.
Yeah.
I think this might be our longest episode yet, but I do not regret that.
No.
Not one bit.
This is something that so many people, until you buy or sell a house, you don't really know what happens and what the process
Questions
is.
that need answers. Shout out Twitter.
So, Daniel, let's talk about the keys to the episode. I know there was an abundance of them, and we could have talked onwards with different questions. But what would you say was your key takeaway?
I think the one sticking point, and it's probably been something that I would like to think that we've been saying this since the very first episode.
Yeah.
Pre-approval.
Second episode when we had the guest on, especially.
Yeah, no.
To do with banking.
But I think it's just something that's so. It's like the elephant in the room that just wants to go unaddressed sometimes.
Yep.
Go get your pre-approval so you can have a good idea of exactly where you stand, what your budget's at, and tick that box.
Yep.
So you can be a serious buyer.
Competitive buyer, and again, that you can go to, even if you've always banked with HSBC, you can certainly get potentially a better pre-approval. One of my clients got a better pre-approval from Butterfield in that situation, and I've heard the vice versa as well.
I was going to say HSBC never going to sponsor us.
No, I've heard on that side, and shout out Clarion, shout out. No, but,
what's your key?
No,
what's your key?
But anyway, shop around because it's so important, and you might get better situations.
My key, yeah.
I think on the seller side, looking to things is, again, to have all of your ducks in a row, especially in a far more competitive and busy market right now. You don't want any unfortunate delays where you're needing to get those, hopefully, get those extensions on an SPA process when you're going through a transaction, because the boundary surveyors are saying, sorry, I can't, you might have 15 or 20 business days from the point of executing a contract, and they might say, you know what, I can't do that for 2-3 months.
You just learned that this episode.
No, exactly. But really, you have to, as a seller, maybe get your boundaries surveyed, understand if there's any encroachments or any issues that you need to sort out. And actually, I've even heard of some sellers, funnily enough, themselves paying for a structural survey.
No, I've heard of that too.
Because that's always the buyer's risk, or not to add that into an offer and into the SPA as a condition. But if a seller does it, they almost preempt any of those issues, and they can share it with the buyer. It is costly, obviously, to do that, but then they know they can address some of the issues before even putting on the market.
You can speak to
so
it.
Just getting everything ready so that you can execute in a worryless kind of position is super important.
No, for sure.
Is worryless a word?
Back to the episode, man.
Anyway, we don't know grammar, but we know real estate. So,
all right. So that leads us. I think we're pretty much done this episode. Oh, before I forget, small business shout out.
Yep, always important.
Not even that small of a business, because she is killing it.
Wow, so medium business shout out.
And it actually works. It actually works out because we're pretty close to the East End. So I'd like to shout out Kristen White from Long Story Short. It's located right on, I want to say Water Street.
Say it then.
I hate this guy. It's located on Water Street. And her store is phenomenal. Has a bunch of Black Bermudian, women-inspired brands, products, and books, and it's a little bit of everything. And then on top of that, which I think is really tremendous, and she actually just recently took out the remember they had the Forbes 30 under 30 or something like that group here. Yep. She took them around on a tour. I saw it highlighted.
They were at Hamilton Princess or something, I think, weren't they?
Probably, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Shout out Hamilton Princess. You're the sponsor guy. I'm just trying to do a little plug there, mate.
But anyway, who she took out, which was even more important before that, was my family down visiting. And she took us on a phenomenal tour. And it's definitely something I'm going to be going back to. I'll probably take you along. Actually, you learn so much history. That can be a social,
side little, it
can be a Keys to the Rock's little social engagement thing that we can do. Yeah. But highlights so much history about Bermuda and stuff like that. And I just feel like, she's
That's
great.
Amazing. And so
fantastic.
many people, even in our schools, just as a side, we aren't even really taught our own history, which is a big shame.
That's another episode.
That is another episode. But further to everything that we're trying to do with this podcast, we also want to do separate little, not if you guys are too sick of us, but we're trying to do separate little episodes within the big, pop-up little clips, shorter clips and things, just to have more insight and info. So shout out to Kristen on that, and thank you to everyone obviously for tuning in to yet another episode.
What number?
We think 9. No one really knows because we're losing count.
Jai just closed the laptop, so we're not sure which episode it is.
So shout out
9.
Jai.
I hope it's 9 because 10 we got to do something big.
And
that's a milestone.
Allie, our property manager, she's away.
It's not a property manager.
It's just on the top of my head. Show manager.
Anywho, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for joining us. Episode 9, Keys to the Rock. Ben Rigo, Daniel Woods, Keys to the Rock.
You just point out yourself. Daniel Woods,
have a great one.
Ben Rigo, Keys to the Rock, episode 9. Thank you for joining us. Have a good one.